Thanks. I'm Konstantin Baierer. I'm from Berlin State Library, working on the OCRD project, which you already heard about in the keynote. And we'll hear about more later on in a talk by my colleague Clemens Neudecker. And so I will not talk about OCRD, but on the lessons learned and our recommendations for ground truth. So what is it what we talk about when we talk about ground truth? Well, first of all, it's the textual transcriptions of documents to be used in training OCR engines and evaluating them. So characters, words, and so on. But it's more than that. It can also be regions and their semantics, their functions on the page, whether it's text or image, whether it's a heading, a footnote, a margin note. And so on. It can also be important to record the physical provenance, so whether there are artifacts on the page, because this is important for training, especially in historical documents, and also the technical provenance, to know which image format, which image depth, and which conversions were done, whether there was some skew, whether the page wasn't perfectly aligned when scanning. All this information can be useful. And so I already said that uses of ground truth are evaluation and training, traditionally for the recognition, so for the actual OCR part of an OCR workflow, but more and more also for segmentation. There are trainable segmentation algorithms now for region classification to determine whether a contiguous area on a page is an image or text or whatever. And also, if you go a step further, if you want to have an algorithm that creates, let's say, a table of contents from a work, then you need some ground truth to either train it or to evaluate how well that works. So ground truth is important, but ground truth is also really costly to create, and really a lot of effort has to be put into it, and you have to know what you want to use it for before creating it, because otherwise you create something that can't be used, and you don't always know which use cases come along and how technology changes. So we think it's vital that you reuse it, that you share it, and that you describe it properly. And for that, we think we need more metadata and a more standardized way to exchange ground truth. So what's metadata? What are some types of metadata for ground truth? Of course, bibliographical and structural. That's like the classical librarian metadata types, but also about the physical appearance of a page and about the technical background that led to its creation. So bibliographic metadata, as I said, is like the bread and butter of librarians, and we have well-established standards, and we strongly recommend using mods, because it's also easily embeddable into METs, and you see in the background how that looks, like a title, author, place of publication, language, and so on. I already mentioned METs, which we think is the perfect format for describing the logical and physical structure of a digital object. So the files that make up the digital object, but also the table of contents and figures and so on, the whole structure, chapters and whatnot. So METs is really works well, and it's well established in the library and archive community. But what about these physical and technical properties that I've already mentioned? We can distinguish between extrinsic features that were added during the creation of the digital object or during digitization, to simplify. The most blatant example would be if there's a hand of the scan operator on the thing, but also skew or shear if the object wasn't perfectly plain. And they are intrinsic features that are innate to the document, like the language, the script, or the scripts it uses, especially if it's multi-language, multi-script, multi-font. That's all important and interesting for for users of that ground truth that want to train on it or evaluate on it. So we thought we should come up with like hundreds and hundreds of properties and reinvent that wheel, but we didn't have to because our colleagues from Prima Research already published an ontology and framework for semantic labeling of document data with a very comprehensive list of properties to describe all these features that I've already mentioned. It's used in Europeana, it's used in their own ground truth repository, and they have tooling to extend that. So we didn't have to reinvent it, but we took it and made it actionable. So we created some XML tooling around that, wrote some scripts to convert it and to make it possible to use it in IDEs like Oxygen, and defined a convention how to embed that into METs. So for example, here we have a stamp on a title page. This is, you can't really see it here, but it's in the page XML, it's a graphic region with type stamp, and it's represented in the METs as a GT state with a property that says that here is a stamp on this page. So that if somebody wants to train, especially for recognizing stamps or working with pages with stamps, he can directly find it. Here's some examples for that. I won't write it down, but you see how comprehensive that is. So for example, here in the background, it's hard to see, but we have a page here that uses a font from that Bastarda family of broken fonts, and it uses multiple typefaces on the same page. So that's interesting information for somebody who wants to train on it. It uses different font sizes, and it has a stamp on it. So this might be interesting. Here's some extrinsic examples that the page was scanned with a low contrast, which makes it harder to work with it, or more challenging if you want to put it in a positive spin. And it's a bit skewed, so it's not completely aligned with the sides, and might be interesting to train your deskewing algorithm. Then I've talked about reusability and shareability. For that, we've developed a format which we call OCRD Zip, which is based on the Baggett format used in web archiving and archiving in general, which in turn is based on just Zip, that archive format. And the idea is that we have one ingestion package that contains everything. It contains the METs, including ground truth metadata, including mods and bibliographic metadata. It contains the images, the transcriptions we chose page XML for OCRD, but you could also use Alto or HOCR or FineReader XML. Baggett also has checksums so that you can ensure that the files are not corrupted, and you can have metadata to know who created that set of ground truth, under what license, and how in depth, and according to which guidelines, ground truth guidelines. And a little plug, we have great ground truth guidelines in OCRD, which you are happy to, which we would be happy if you would have a look at. Then we have a variety of repositories within OCRD for different purposes. One of them is providing ground truth. You see in the background a screenshot of the current state of our ground truth repository. All of these repositories work with OCRD Zip, so that we have one format for ground truth and for intermediate results and for long-term archiving of OCR results. And it's based on a software by our partner, Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, KIT Data Manager, and Elasticsearch, which indexes all these ground truth metadata and allows you to create queries like this one. So this is a bit convoluted, but let's say I want to train my OCR engine on historical documents from the time of the 30-year war 2 columns because I want to train my layout recognition engine, and German Dutch because why not? And you see, I can define the time range, I can define the languages, and I can define these technical and physical properties that I want. Antigua font, I want different font sizes, and I want 2 columns. So this is about as complicated as it could get, but yeah, it's also really powerful. So in conclusion, what we are doing here is deliberately not rocket science. We try to find the simplest solution. We try to blatantly reuse as much existing work as we can. And we also want you to blatantly reuse as much of what we did here. And we try to reuse standards. And yeah, hopefully we can get the discussion started and get you to work with us on this. And here are lots of links. Our website, my colleague has been collecting ground truth data sets from around the web. We have specifications, we have guidelines on creating ground truth in a standardized way. OCRD Zip is documented. We have lots of repositories on GitHub and a GitHub chat where you are happily invited to chat with us. So, thank you.
Any questions? No? I can ask a question. Thank you, Konstantin. Can you tell us what were the major challenges? Because you can specify a lot of things for ground truth, but in practice, some of the labeling may not happen, or people do it slightly differently. And you know, what is your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is to agree on how to transcribe stuff. So how to what encoding to use, and how to, especially with historical documents and historical variants of language, it gets really hard, and you have to spend a lot of time defining guidelines for that, and then also ensuring that these guidelines are met. And for the ground truth on segmentation, it's also about the tooling, because that's not trivial to do, and you need to train people. So yeah, I think it's just in general it's a lot of effort, and yeah.
Yes, and have you any procedures for validating the ground truth before ingesting it into your repositories, or what are your thoughts on this?
So we have some validators for various formal things that like the documents are consistent if they have transcriptions on different levels, for example, which we can do automatically, and we also validate that these OCRD zips are valid, and that metadata is provided and valid. But in many cases it's a lot of manual control, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting talk. It's quite new to standard. How much data have you actually annotated with this kind of rules and specifications?
I should probably refer you to Matthias, because he has the actual numbers. But 200 documents with...
Today we have 200 documents linked with these metadata.
Okay. 200 pages? Or?
No, 200 documents with not complete volumes, but maybe 20 pages, 30 pages, something around that.
But going forward, this is what you want to use, I guess?
Yeah, and we also want to, whoops, sorry. That was my timer. I've met my 15 minutes. No, we want to convert what we have also to this format and provide it. Yeah.
Thank you.
an additional question to what Apostles was asking you. What type of people are doing the transcriptions? Because you say, are these philologists, linguists, or librarians? Who are you involving doing the ground truth? Because the quality depends really on how well you know A, the language, and B, the characters and how to recognize them.
Yeah, so most of the ground truth that we use in OCRD comes from the Deutsches Textarchiv project that collects German first editions from all ages, and they have been very well transcribed by domain experts. So these are really high quality, but we also had some external commercial provider doing the same in a semi-manual way, which led to a lot of communication, let's say. So yeah, it's hard. Yeah.
Any more questions?
What is the granularity of your ground truth? Are you going on text blocks, lines, words, characters?
We have different levels defined for different purposes, but it goes down to so the real question is always on character level, but the real question is how to handle like ligatures and stuff like that. But on level 3 of our guidelines, it goes really into depth, I'd say.
Good. No more questions? I just have a remark that in our experience, it's not only one set of people who should do the ground truth. It could be the domain experts in terms of the content, but also needs the technical people as well. Again, for complete ground truth, make sure the standards are kept and conventions are for processing and so on. So it's just worth putting some thought into the different communities how they can use that.
Yeah, sure.
Usability and
But ideally, we'd have at some point a format that you can like throw into your training engine and get out a model, or throw into your post correction tool and get out new results. So that would be perfect. But it's a lot of effort for both the experts and the tech people.